chosen one, not every chapter in your life was meant to continue. Some were only meant to change you. They arrive like storms, beautiful and chaotic, promising growth but never permanence. And yet here you are, still holding the torn pages of something that was always meant to end. You keep asking for signs, but the ending was the sign. You keep searching for meaning, but the meaning was never about them, it was about you. That chapter was never meant to last forever. It was a bridge, not a destination. A lesson, not a life sentence. If you're watching this video, it's because your soul is ready to close what your heart still wants to hold. You're standing at the edge of an old story, knowing it cannot follow you forward. Watch this video to the end. Every second will speak to the deepest part of you. And if you're ready to let go, to open space for the new, write your warmest wishes in the comments along with 777. This is more than just a message. This is a moment, a shift, an invitation to align with divine timing and step fully into the version of you that no longer needs to beg for closure. You knew it before the words were said, before the actions confirmed it. You felt the pull away, the energy shift, the silence that grew louder than promises. You tried to make it make sense. You tried to rewrite the ending into something softer, more digestible. But the truth is, you were never supposed to stay there. You were never meant to keep trying. That door didn't close to punish you. It closed to protect you, because if you had stayed, if you had pushed further into what was dying, you would have dimmed the very light that was meant to rise. You were never weak for loving, but you became exhausted trying to revive what was already spiritually gone. That chapter had no more life to give. And yet you kept rereading it, hoping the ending would change. You kept holding space for people who had long stopped showing up. You silenced your intuition in the name of loyalty. But what if I told you the ending was mercy, that the heartbreak was alignment, that you being forced to let go was the start of your freedom, not the end of your worth? There comes a time in every chosen one's journey where they have to bury what they once prayed for, not because it was evil, not because it was meaningless, but because it had completed its purpose. And purpose doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looks like pain that cracked open your discernment. Sometimes it looks like disappointment that shook you awake. Sometimes it looks like the friend who betrayed you so deeply, it forced you to return to yourself. That's how you reclaim your power, not by clinging to what broke you, but by rising from it with clarity. You may still miss it. That's okay. You may still think about it late at night, wondering if you gave up too soon, but deep down you already know the version of you that stayed in that chapter was shrinking. You were editing yourself to fit a role that was never meant for the main character. You were carrying the story when you were meant to rewrite it, and now the page has turned. Not by force, but by fate. There's nothing left for you there. No more growth, no more evolution, just echoes, just loops. And you weren't born for cycles, you were born for progression. You weren't designed to survive in a chapter that required you to forget your identity. That's why it felt heavy. That's why the longer you stayed, the more distant you became from your own reflection. But now, something is rising inside you, a quiet certainty, a sacred yes, a divine push that whispers, it's time. Time to stop explaining yourself to those who never saw you. Time to stop mourning doors that no longer open. Time to stop asking for closure from people who were only ever meant to be catalysts. Time to stop delaying the next season because you're afraid of leaving someone behind. You're not the villain for choosing your peace. You're not heartless for following alignment. You're not cold for trusting your spirit more than nostalgia. That old chapter gave you what it came to give. Now it's your turn to give yourself permission to move on, because what's coming next isn't compatible with who you were in that last season, and it sure as heaven isn't compatible with who you had to shrink for. You are shedding, releasing, breaking free. This is not just about walking away. It's about rising without apology. You're not escaping anything. You're stepping into everything. They won't understand. That's not your problem. They'll talk. Let them. Your confirmation isn't coming from them. It's coming from within, from above, from the space you're finally clearing for truth to land. And when it does, it won't ask for permission. It won't wait for the world's applause. It will arrive like fire, like clarity, like a mirror that reflects the warrior you became in the shadows of that old story. Let it go. Let it burn. Let the ashes become the soil of your rebirth. You wanted them to grow with you. You waited. You gave grace. You bent your timeline. You softened your truth. All in the hope that they'd catch up, that the energy would align, that maybe, just maybe, the story could continue. But deep down, you always knew the timing was off for a reason. The silence wasn't a pause. It was a period. And it's not cruelty to admit it now. It's clarity. You stayed long enough to outgrow the room, to feel the walls closing in around your spirit. What once felt like a home became a cage. And no matter how you rearranged the furniture, it still couldn't hold your wings. There's a grief that comes when you realize something beautiful is no longer aligned. A soft mourning, not just for what was, but for the version of you who believed it could last. You were loyal to potential, faithful to the promise, but it takes courage to see when the promise has expired. You don't dishonor the love by letting go. You honor the lesson by accepting the exit. That's what most people don't understand about closure. It doesn't come with perfect words. It doesn't arrive wrapped in explanation. Sometimes closure is just acceptance without answers. And here's the truth you've avoided long enough. Some chapters end without warning because if you had known, you wouldn't have let them go. You'd still be holding on, still rewriting, still negotiating with destiny. But destiny doesn't bargain. It moves on schedule. It delivers disruption not as punishment, but as preservation. Because what's ahead requires you whole, not broken by people you keep giving second, third, and 10th chances to. You've changed. And it's not your responsibility to dim that light to keep others comfortable. That's the hard part about awakening. You start to see clearly what you once excused. You hear differently. You feel more deeply. And that sensitivity isn't weakness, it's spiritual intelligence. It's your system alerting you that you've outgrown environments, energies, and even conversations that used to define your world. You're not crazy for feeling like you don't belong in that old rhythm anymore. You're not selfish for needing solitude to hear your next step. You're evolving. And evolution is lonely, not because you're doing it wrong, but because most people choose comfort over growth. You didn't. You listened when your spirit whispered, "This can't be all there is." You leaned into the pull even when your mind screamed to stay. That's how you know you're chosen. Not because life was easy, but because you kept rising through what was meant to bury you. Now you're standing in that in-between space, the afterglow of endings and the silence before beginnings. It's tempting to turn back, to fill the quiet with distraction, to chase what no longer fits just to feel something familiar. But don't. The discomfort is proof of your alignment. You are exactly where you're meant to be. And though it feels like nothing's moving, everything inside you is shifting. Your capacity, your discernment, your awareness, your ability to receive without clinging and release without resentment. This is where your story starts to unfold differently. No longer driven by urgency, no longer hijacked by unworthy attachments, but shaped by wisdom, by peace, by purpose. You've crossed the threshold, and even if no one applauds, the heavens noticed. You passed the test of letting go without a dramatic ending, of walking away with dignity, of trusting the void would become a portal, not a punishment. So let the past keep its memories. You don't need to carry all of them. Let the people who didn't choose you sit with their silence. It's not your job to make them understand. You don't need closure from those who lacked the courage to give it. What you need is already rising within you, a stillness that says, I'm done bleeding for what no longer feeds me. There is a divine intelligence guiding you now, subtle but strong. You don't need a sign written in the sky. Your peace is the confirmation. Your ease is the signal. When it flows, follow. When it drains you, release. Life is not meant to be a series of survival chapters. You weren't sent here to endure endless tests. You were sent to rise, to create, to transform. And that requires space. Space only made when you're willing to stop resurrecting what destiny already buried. They may not understand your silence. That's okay. Silence is sacred when spoken words would only distort the truth. Let your distance be your declaration. Let your absence speak what your voice never could. You're not punishing anyone by choosing yourself. You're honoring the version of you that finally knows when to leave. Let that chapter rest. Let that version of you rest. You no longer have to pretend you're okay in places that never saw you. You don't need to fight for attention in spaces you've already outgrown. This is your call to release. To surrender not because you're weak, but because you're wise. The next part of your story needs you light, needs you clear, needs you ready, and you can't be ready while dragging ghosts behind you. You keep asking if you did the right thing by letting go, if you moved too soon, if maybe just one more try would have saved it. But that's just the echo of the old you, the one who thought love meant suffering, that loyalty required losing yourself, that proving your worth meant staying longer than you should have. But you've grown past that now. You've learned that peace is the clearest answer. And when you had to constantly explain, defend, or shrink, peace was never present. That's your confirmation. You don't need to beg for what's already aligned. You don't need to audition for what's yours. The people, places, and purposes that are meant for you will recognize you. They will speak the same frequency. They will mirror back the wholeness you've cultivated. And more importantly, they will not confuse your silence with absence or your strength with threat. They will not need to be convinced. They will see you because they too will have done the work. The hardest part of releasing a chapter that meant something is not the goodbye itself. It's the emptiness that follows. That sudden space where identity, routine, or dreams used to live. But what feels like emptiness is actually potential, it's possibility, it's spiritual room for alignment. Think of it like a garden. You had to uproot what was no longer blooming, not because it never had value, but because its season ended. And if you keep watering a dead thing, you rob yourself of the energy needed to grow something living. You've forgotten how much life is still ahead of you. You've been grieving endings as if they were total loss, but what if they were sacred redirections? What if the delays, the disconnections, the discomforts were all orchestrated to lead you here, to the edge of a life that finally reflects your truth? You're not stuck, you're transitioning, and transitions are meant to feel unfamiliar, even painful at times. But don't mistake unfamiliar for wrong. Don't confuse discomfort with failure. What you're experiencing is the dissolving of illusions, old beliefs, unhealthy patterns, outdated identities. That disorientation you feel, it's the rewiring of your nervous system finally aligning with who you've become. You don't owe your past a permanent seat at your future table. You can forgive someone and still not take them with you. You can honor the memory without keeping it alive in your current decisions, because if you keep consulting the old chapter before every step, you'll remain tethered to a version of you that was only meant to be temporary. You weren't born to be a character in someone else's unfinished story. You were born to write your own. And yes, sometimes the next sentence requires burning the page. You won't always get closure. You won't always get apologies. Some people don't heal because they never admit what they broke. And if you wait for their awareness to move on, you give them the pen to your life. Take it back. Write your release, not in anger, but in authority. Not in bitterness, but in boldness. Because what comes next will require a clearer you, not a compromised one. You've held on to so many weights that were never yours, expectations that weren't aligned, roles you never chose. And now that you're ready to move forward, you may feel guilt rising, but remember, guilt is not always truth. Sometimes guilt is the residue of boundaries, of choosing yourself, of making peace with being misunderstood. You don't need to explain this shift. You don't need everyone's blessing to step into your next. Most won't even see the change until the fruit appears, until the joy returns, until the glow they couldn't dim begins to shine again. And by then, it'll be too late for those who took your grace for granted. You're not cold, you're not cruel, you're finally clear. That's what they don't understand, that you tried, that you stayed too long, that you gave more than most would. But now, you're giving that same love and loyalty to yourself. There will be days where you remember the laughter, the early moments, the dreams, and you'll wonder if it was real. Let me tell you, it was. But that doesn't mean it was forever. Some things can be beautiful and still not be meant to last. Some people can be kind and still not be meant to go where you're going. Some chapters can be powerful and still not be the final one. So don't doubt the ending just because it wasn't dramatic. Don't question the release just because it wasn't loud. Sometimes the most sacred exits are silent. Sometimes the real transformation doesn't come with applause, but with peace. You are not who you were. That version of you who tolerated less than they deserved is no longer here. And even if you miss parts of them, even if you mourn their softness, know this, the softness didn't die. It just evolved. It became boundaries, it became discernment, it became a deeper love rooted in truth, not fantasy. You are not hard now, you are holy. You are not bitter, you are better. You are not broken, you are becoming. And this part of your becoming requires space, requires silence, requires solitude. Let it be what it is. Let the world think you're distant. Let the old stories wonder why you left. You don't owe them an explanation when your peace already answered it. It takes great courage to admit something you once prayed for has now become a burden. To admit that the thing you once fought so hard to keep no longer fits who you are. But that kind of honesty is sacred. That kind of truth is freedom. You spent years trying to hold it together. You ignored the red flags, reinterpreted the signs, told yourself to be more patient, more flexible, more understanding. And for what? To keep something alive that had already completed its assignment in your life. You didn't fail. You outgrew. And not everyone will applaud that. Some will call it giving up. But the truth, you gave everything. And now you're giving it back to the universe because you finally realize it's not yours to carry anymore. Some stories lose their meaning when you keep turning the same page, hoping it'll end differently. You're not rewriting the past, you're just rereading pain. Let it go. Even if you don't have all the answers yet, even if there's no neat conclusion. Some chapters are better left unfinished because their purpose wasn't completion, it was revelation. You learned what you needed to learn. You became who you needed to become. And now the door has closed not because you are unworthy, but because your worth no longer matches the energy of what you were holding on to. You don't need to mourn that. You need to honor it, thank it, release it. Your next season will require a lighter heart. You can't take everything with you. The opinions, the regrets, the hopes you still have for people who refuse to grow. You've tried and tried again. But at some point, healing turns into enabling. Faith turns into self-neglect, and love turns into a leash. You don't need to prove you're still available to people who never showed up for you. You don't have to keep the door cracked open for someone who walked out without looking back. Close it. Not with resentment, with reverence, because every time you rehearse the ending, you postpone the beginning. You weren't meant to live in a hallway. You weren't born to wait in the in-between. You're here to move forward. And yes, it's terrifying. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, you'll question yourself in the middle of the night, but still move. Still trust. Still breathe through the silence. The clarity is coming. The peace is real. The light is closer than you think. You've been loyal to everyone but yourself. You've carried others across bridges they later burned. You've dimmed your light to match rooms that couldn't handle your full glow. But no more. This next chapter is about radical alignment. No more compromising your peace to avoid confrontation. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. The truth is, you've known for a while now. You just didn't want to believe it. You wanted things to work out. You wanted the potential to finally show up, but potential without action is a fantasy. And you've lived in that fantasy long enough. It's time to come home to what's real, and what's real is this. You're allowed to grow in ways that scare people. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to walk away even if nothing bad happened, because sometimes the most dangerous thing is when nothing changes at all, and you can't afford stillness in a season that requires movement. You've been here before. That crossroad, that familiar ache, that tension between the comfort of the known and the invitation of the unknown. But this time you won't choose fear. You won't settle for what's safe. You'll choose the path that calls you, even if it's quieter. Even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else. Because deep down, you know, the old chapter was never meant to continue. It served its role. It held your hand when you needed stability. It taught you lessons your soul agreed to before this lifetime began. And now its assignment is complete, so give yourself permission to leave, to detach, to choose joy over familiarity, peace over pressure, truth over tradition. Your spirit is ready, your mind is catching up. Let the shift happen. Let the winds of transition blow through every rigid expectation. Let go of timelines. Let go of needing everything to make sense. This is the part where faith has to be louder than logic, where vision overrides validation, where you walk, not because you see the next step, but because you feel the pull of destiny in your chest. And don't worry about what's behind you. That chapter will fade, that voice will quiet, that ache will soften. What's ahead will make you wonder why you ever questioned leaving. It's not the end, it's the release. It's not a loss, it's a return. A return to clarity, to strength, to soul, and eventually to a life that finally matches the frequency you've been carrying inside all along. You're no longer looking for signs, you've become the sign. The way you walk now with less urgency, more clarity. The way you no longer flinch at silence. The way you hold your own energy without begging for anyone to match it. That's the evidence, that's the transformation they never saw coming. You used to explain everything. Every decision, every pause, every boundary. Hoping they'd understand, hoping they'd meet you halfway. But now you've realized, understanding is not a requirement for release. Agreement is not a prerequisite for peace. You don't need applause to trust your own steps. This new chapter doesn't ask you to fight for your place. It simply invites you to take it. You'll notice the air feels different now, not because everything around you has changed, but because you have. The version of you that stayed out of guilt, that shrunk to be accepted, that compromised intuition for connection, that version has laid down her armor, and in that letting go she found her true strength. Don't be surprised if people try to pull you back into roles you've already outgrown. They'll say you've changed, as if that's a flaw. They'll miss the old version of you that overextended, that overexplained, that overloved. But you don't belong to that version anymore. You've graduated. This is where you stop circling lessons. This is where you step out of karmic loops. This is where the patterns lose their power, because you finally stopped feeding them. There is a calm now, isn't there? A quiet kind of knowing. Not loud, not performative, just steady. And with it comes the realization that you don't need to be chosen. You already are, by life, by purpose, by every moment that tried to break you and couldn't. What you release now releases you back. No one will understand the cost of this evolution unless they've paid it too. And that's okay. You didn't evolve for their approval. You did it because staying small was suffocating your soul. So let the old chapter fade like smoke through an open window. Let the attachments dissolve with grace. Let the silence be your sacred punctuation, not an end, but a breath before the next beautiful beginning. The chapter didn't fail, it finished. And the pain of letting go isn't always about the loss. It's about the fact that a part of you believed it could have been more, that if you just held on longer, bent further, dimmed a little more, maybe it could have worked, but now you know. Some chapters aren't meant to bloom. They're meant to break you open, so you'll never settle for a soil that doesn't nourish your roots again. The lesson is not in how much you endured, it's in how bravely you walked away when your spirit finally said, no more. You weren't meant to stay in that room, that mindset, that emotional cycle. You were meant to evolve, to choose growth over comfort, to say bye to what only knew how to love the old version of you. There's nothing wrong with remembering, but don't confuse reflection with revival. Don't revisit what you've already released. Healing isn't found in reattachment, it's found in rebuilding. And you've been rebuilding in silence, without announcements, without witnesses, without applause. Now there's a strength in your stillness. You don't argue with what's beneath you anymore. You don't justify your boundaries. You don't apologize for the clarity that kept you alive. You stopped romanticizing what was never ready to hold you. They didn't change. That's not the story. You did, and that's enough. They may say you walked away too soon, but you know the truth. You stayed far longer than your soul could afford. You gave grace and then some. You waited, prayed, forgave, and waited again. But eventually you reached the cliff's edge, and this time you didn't jump to prove your loyalty. You turned around and walked back to yourself. This isn't about bitterness, this is about balance. You were giving love at a discount to those who only knew how to spend it, not protect it. And now you're learning how to guard your garden. Not out of fear, but because you've learned what blooms when you protect your peace. They don't have to understand why you left the chapter behind. They don't need the pages. You're not here to prove pain. You're here to walk in purpose. The hardest part isn't releasing what hurt you. It's releasing the hope that it ever would have healed you. But now, with the air clearer and your heart steadier, you realize something powerful. Endings aren't curses, they're confirmations. Your soul isn't grieving the chapter, it's exhaling, it's whispering, we made it out. Not every person who walked with you was meant to witness your rise. Some were only there to spark the awakening, to trigger the discomfort, to show you the cracks in your foundation so you'd finally rebuild it stronger. That was their role, and now it's complete. You won't find your next chapter by reopening the last one. You'll find it by trusting that your spirit knows when it's time to close the book entirely. Let the silence stay, let the echoes fade, let the unfinished conversations remain unfinished. You don't owe closure to those who weren't careful with your heart. You owe peace to the version of you that finally chose to protect it. So as you walk forward, lighter now, freer now, more whole than you've ever been, carry this truth with you. That chapter was never meant to continue because you were never meant to stay that small. You're not walking into the unknown anymore. You're walking into alignment. The hesitation has faded. The questions are quieter. The ache is softer. What remains now is the quiet confidence of someone who finally knows. Nothing real is ever lost. It simply evolves with you. Or it gets left behind. You don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. You don't even need them to understand what it cost you. You just need peace. And that's exactly what you've chosen. Not because it's easy, but because it's sacred, because fighting for things that don't fight for you is a game you've retired from. You've felt the weight of old expectations fall off your shoulders. You've felt the space open in your chest where grief used to live. You've noticed how silence no longer screams, but sings. And that's growth. Let them wonder why you stopped calling. Let them question your distance. Let them assume what they must. You're no longer performing healing for those who never saw your wounds. You're no longer explaining clarity to those committed to confusion. You've outgrown the version of yourself who used to need permission. Now you walk because the path is yours, not because it was paved, not because it was easy, but because you finally remembered who you are without the weight of the chapter you left behind. And that remembering, that is the true beginning.